Hi everyone, it's Frank Spencer. This is Meditations and Transformations number 17. And this is the video that those who practice futures thinking and foresight as a professional discipline, as a practice, as a field, those who inside that field aren't crazy about this video. At least that's what I was told a year and a half, 2 years ago. When I last posted, because I'll do it from time to time if the purpose is right, I posted an article that I wrote for Fast Company Online in 2013. So it's been 12 years ago that I posted this article. And it was called Why Predicting Trends Won't Help You Prepare for the Future, something along those lines. And in that article, I talked about the problem with trends, trend analysis, trend scanning, trend hunting, and then what was better than that in terms of inspiration and imagination and design development and just a slurry of other things, different ways to approach futures thinking that didn't involve the circular reference, so to speak, of trends. I'll get back to that in just a moment. What do I mean by that? Let me get back to that. Let me tell you first why people don't like this. So I reposted this because the purpose was right on some post about a year and a half, 2 years ago. And springing out of that actually was a panel debate hosted by two individuals on an Association of Professional Futurists special event online. And to be honest, the event didn't focus on that article, but the article came up repeatedly in the debate from a person who took the side of an article like this was not only unhelpful, it was presumptuous, it was just dead wrong. It was made by people who don't understand futures and futuring, and it was mean-spirited, and I can't even remember the other words, but completely wrong-headed and made by somebody who just needs to get out of the futures field. That's what was said. Okay, so I'm not going anywhere, and that's cool. You can argue that point, but let me get back to the part about trends. And I want to frame it this way. This is why this is coming up for me at this time. It does all the time, really. But I saw a post today, again, that just brought this back up for me and then brought to me some things that I've been talking about recently that I want to re-platform in this short video and that are, top of mind for me. So trends. Why do I harp on trends not being something that I'm all that concerned about often? Obviously, I'd say 25 years ago, that's what all I was doing. As I was using trends, trends were everything to me. And then I went, studied futures more formally, and I added some things. But in those formal studies, trends were a big deal. And so we were scanning trends and analyzing trends and scouting trends and compiling trends and piling up trends and finding trends, all this good stuff, right? The simple answer is trends really don't have a lot to do with the future. The reason you know about them is they're here today. Trends are today. Now, yes, they have directionality to them. They're medium and long term in their ongoing relevance and directionality. But nonetheless, they're here today. But really, probably the more important, the second reason is because they are circular. What do I mean by that? Because trends largely, overwhelmingly are coming from inside the system. The call is coming from inside the house. And so they're created, they're consumed by a system, by the system that created them. It's like the snake eating its own tail, except there's no regeneration here. It's just a death cult. It's a vicious cycle, not a virtuous cycle. Einstein put it this way. You've heard this from me many times before. He said, we cannot solve our problems or address issues with the same level of consciousness that created them. In other words, you can't do something about the future and be transformational with stuff that's coming from inside the system that is just reiterating itself over and over again. I mean, unless you believe that this system, which has created vast separation, environmental, social, political, cultural destruction, extraction, exploitation, consumption, extrapolation, and the list goes on and on again, is something that we should keep perpetuating. Okay, so if that's the case, then how do we future, if it's not trends we're looking for? And I think more and more and more today, I'm so happy to see that we're seeing more people that understanding that futuring is not about trend hunting or circulating over again, eating the food that comes out of the system. I don't want to get gross here, but it's sort of like Soylent Green. Have you ever seen the movie Soylent Green with Charlton Heston? It's people! You're eating people! People eating people. Trends using trends from those who created trends, for the trends, by the trends, of the trends. Woo, it's exhausting. And it's just circular, and it's a death cult. It leads nowhere. The more we eat, the more we consume our own selves. Gosh, I do not want to get gross here, but you're probably thinking of some things here while I'm saying this. The more we do that, the more diseased we become, the more infected we become, the more brittle we become and fragile we become. It's not leading to life. You have to have diversity and a healthy diet and stuff that comes from outside of the things that you don't normally get. If you just eat your own self, then you're going to be, you're going to be a zombie. You're going to be cannibalistic, and you're going to not get the nutrients that you need. They don't come from inside the system. They come from the cracks in the system outside the system. And this is why I can't understand futuring, and it makes less and less sense to me every day, that is like just compiling itself over and over again. It's like just like, AI. And so this is what I was going to get to. I've already rambled enough. I saw a post today, and it was like, the future of food, the future of food. And it's going to be about, and then the sentences were, contain these words: brand, consumer, organization, corporation, AI, consulting, the system and supply chains and all of this stuff. And I'm just hearing to myself, it's like, it's the same thing I just went through and just told you again. It's like, is that the future of food? All I had to do was just go to Google real quick. I opened up another tab and I was like, hey, non-corporative futures of food. And there was just a, slop, of course, list that in this particular case was semi-helpful, because it just told me right away. It's like I can find just by a simple Google search, which is not that helpful, that these things are like presented at giant conferences on the future of something or another. The future of food in this particular case were things that were just like gimmicky. They're gimmicky. Corporations selling trends to other corporations, then use those trends to sell back to those corporations and sell to people, and to create futures, the official future that they created, they're feeding to us. Interesting, in this case, it was the future of food. They're feeding it to us. The trends are being fed to you by somebody else's future. That's what trends are, that are created inside the system. Unless you're seeing true imaginative anticipation, cracks in the system, ways finding, as my friend Sanya Blachnut says, the path unfolds as we walk it. The map unfolds as we walk it. So 921, 3 quick quotes. So this is from an article that I've just been really jazzing about for weeks now, and you saw my recent interview with Michelle Shevin. She wrote this article, and you can find it on Medium under Michelle Shevin, Possibility plus Power equals Plan. 2 quick quotes from this article where she says, look, I used to work in futures, and she still does, but she was like, and I was doing these futures workshops, And she says in these rapid fire forecasts, it apparently wasn't worth mentioning that most of the tech didn't seem to be surviving first contact with social systems, nor that the Philip K. Dick novel had been more of a warning than instruction manual. I mean, we see this all time today. And again, in this future of food bullet point that everybody was devouring, going like, oh, it's amazing. One of the things was like AI, helpmates and stuff, and it's just like that's just slop. That is slop. It's boring. It's lazy. It's sloppy. And I'll do a whole nother video on something that I've harped on already a million times before, AI. But I've been saying some new things on it recently, so maybe some of that later. If I do that, it will not be really as much of an anti-AI video, I'm sure that will come across, as it will be a pro-cosmos video, and I'll get to that when I explain it. So, and then she says that our ethos was, if something could happen, it would happen. And this is what I think trends do too. They're like, oh, bubbling up is this consumers love to eat fake meat and all that. If we could do it, we will do it. And it doesn't mean that we should do it. There's so many other amazing outside the system, cracks in the system, imaginal anticipation, futures of food, just to harp on that issue for a moment, than fake meat. That's just another branding and marketing trend made by people who want you to eat the trend and then regurgitate the trend and vomit the trend and all that good stuff. So, right? We didn't operate from an explicit values framework. What is the explicit values? When we treat trends like they're just these agnostic things, they're absolutely not. They're value laden. Everything, technology is inherently made with value. Trends contain somebody's value. Whose value? Corporations' value. This is why corporate foresight more and more, don't get me wrong, organizations need to use foresight, but the label corporate foresight is foresight created by corporations, from corporations, for corporations to control the masses. It's plain and simple. We didn't operate from an explicit values framework, blind the implicit power, mind the horizon to help our powerful clients stay on top. And then she just quickly says, and I love this, in this model of forecasting and futures thinking and predictions becoming plans, events like technological discrimination or technological oppression or the protest rising in response to AI and tech supremacy and tech feudalism and technocracies, which you don't hear about in futures workshops, strangely. You hear about the power of AI, and you hear about metaverses, and you don't hear about like these incredible events that are happening outside of the things that can be monetized. Trends are just monetization tools, largely. If you're listening to me and you don't practice this way, that's fine, because you might be saying right now, no, Frank, I totally get it. Those are trends too. But what I'm saying is that largely they aren't, but I agree with you, they are. These things are trends that are larger than AI. They're often framed as rare, adherent, and unexpected. Rather than provoking reflection on hard questions, such signals are instead swept into the tide of trend forecasting. In this way, the routine experiences of those made marginal in our systems are stripped of their power to be transformative conduits of new possibilities as they are folded into narratives of inevitability through futures planning processes. Yeah, in other words, those things sort of on the periphery, which are probably bigger actual trends, but suggest cracks in the system, they're the ones that are ignored. The ones that we get jazzed about are the ones that sound like, ooh, bright, shiny object fed to me by somebody else's future inside the system of corporative, colonial, modernity foresight. I've got to stop this video now. Let me just say two quick things. One is from Benita Roy. And in this article, in Cognition in the Wild, she talks about the fact that the horse and the rider, one is not controlling the other, but the rider tends to feel the horse, and the horse feels the rider after a period of time, and they know when to jump, and he knows when to leave the saddle, and they become one, but they're interrelating with one another. So relational emergence between the two. And then she says, how might we tackle a meaning crisis in a world, sense making? And then she goes on to say that perhaps what we think are mystical or superpowers that we need today are not somehow capacities up there in our evolutionary future. They're not waiting to evolve. We already have them in the capacities such as cultivating a deep inner compass, becoming intimate with our sense of place, trusting that we can wayfind without maps. That's transformative futuring. Instead of worrying about where we are, we need to focus on how we are, how we're journeying together, why we're moving in the first place. So powerful. And I'll just end by saying that this amazing article that's called Who Sees the Future First and Why We Keep Ignoring Them, that comes from Radical Futures. And I probably should have looked up the name, but that's my fault. Tracy, somebody. Tracy, who are you, Tracy? I know your name. I'm so sorry. I'll put it in the notes. I'm really sorry about that. I'll put it in the notes. But she says, I love this. This is so powerful. In mainstream futures work, foresight is often framed as a technical process of models and scenarios and signals and systems maps. But for many Black and marginalized communities, foresight has never been optional or theoretical. It's been embodied, rooted in lived experience, inherited wisdom, and the imperative survive systems designed to overlook or erase us. There's a growing sense of shock across institutions and media. How did we get where we are today? But for many Black and marginalized communities, this moment doesn't feel like a rupture. It's a confirmation. What are the most important signals? This is what Bonita was saying. This is what Michelle was just saying. What are the most important signals weren't the ones we could measure, like the ones on the post that I saw today about the futures of food, but they're ones that we're actually trained to ignore. We're not trained to ignore trends, but what are we trained to ignore? And isn't that what futures should really be looking at? I'll see you soon.